Dr. Thomas?
Okay, so it's now being recorded.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. So good afternoon to everyone. So we're group 42 and we'll be presenting our thesis proposal, which is entitled Evaluating the Readiness of the Philippines in the Implementation of Digital Currency. So for introduction,
So before so before we talk about the possible implementation of central bank digital currency in the Philippines, it is necessary to talk about what a central bank digital currency is and what technology it possesses. So as you may not know, a central bank digital currency is very similar, has shares very similar traits to the widely available cryptocurrencies in the market. And these cryptocurrencies are known as digital assets or virtual currencies that is secured by cryptography. That is secured by cryptography, which means that they cannot be counterfeited or be double spent. And many of these cryptocurrencies are also decentralized networks, which are all based from blockchain technology. And a blockchain a blockchain technology is known as a public ledger that facilitates the processes or the ongoing transactions that is happening on that network, and also it tracks all of those assets. Behind the motivations for majority of central banks to consider their development of their CBDCs, there are factors that are concerning towards this development, and one of those factors are concerns about the cryptocurrencies that are mentioned. And for so long, central banks have wanted to regulate um, or centralize these cryptocurrencies as to as to implement laws concerning about all of the transactions against it. But in essence, these cryptocurrencies are that are not set by the general authority or the central authority, which means that they only function as a medium of exchange that can be automatically authenticated by the blockchain technology without any third-party interference. And proceeding to the other factor that led to the development of the CBDC is the widely global pandemic that caused a paradigm shift towards the traditional payment system, as this resulted to an increased usage of digital counterparts such as e-wallets, and and thus it brought the government authorities along with private financial institutions to finally take the opportunity to shift the economy to digitalization. Okay, next slide, please.
so for our statement of the problem, a little bit of background on how we arrived in our problem. So as we all know, the technology keeps on advancing through the years, and because of technology, digital payments were invented, and digital payments really made a lot of people's lives easier. We can transfer cash in a single moment, and because of digital payments, it also led to countries on experimenting and piloting CBDC. A very famous country, which is the Bahamas. They are the first country that launched the Sun Dollar, the very first CBDC. And here in the Philippines, there's still no announcement on whether we will be implementing or studying about CBDC. But what we only have here in the Philippines is that we only have digital payments like Paymaya and GCash. So that's why we came with this statement of the problem. So the paper aims to evaluate whether implementing central bank digital currency will be effective in the Philippines?
As for the research objectives for the study is primarily about to provide the data that is needed um, to conclude the implementation for the CBDCs in the Philippines, and mostly to mostly these data are the ones that are going to confirm the aspects of the countries who have already performed the CBD pilot test, and they will these factors will then be compared to the current status of the country and or the economy in order to determine whether the Philippines is ready for the implementation of that digital currency. Next slide, please.
So for our hypothesis, so our study, we would like to provide qualitative research data that can answer whether CBDC will be feasible here in the Philippines. So for our research question, we would like to ask that, is the Philippines ready for the implementation of the digital currency? Is it ready in terms of technology? Is it legal? And of course, is the economic ready also?
And prior to the development of the digital currency, there has been strong evidences that suggest that the increased usage or the increased use of digital payments, and one of which is from the BSP governor, where he stated that there were around 53 adult Filipinos who have access to electronic money accounts compared to 2019, which was only 29%. And this also further encouraged that to use these digital payments because majority of the regulators and stakeholders continue to strengthen the system of these platforms. And and the BSP governor also added that there are also a number of reasons on why to adopt a digital payment, such as the central bank digital currency to Filipinos, as because they lack the savings of an account. They lack the awareness to open an account, which may be used for which are all going to be used for transacting through digital channels. And most of these factors will also be further magnified from poor internet connectivity at some areas in the country.
So moving on, the significance of the study, it focuses on these ideas that the central bank digital currency provides aid for the companies due to the security and swiftness of payments that creates better transactions between suppliers and consumers. CBDC also reduces the maintenance of complex financial systems and cross-border transactions. And lastly, CBDC simplifies the implementation of all monetary and fiscal policies. Next, please.
So for our study scope and limitations, so our study will primarily focus on central bank digital currency. Other digital currencies like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies won't be involved in our study. So our study will also be pure qualitative, and we'll just focus on the measurement whether CBDC whether implementing CBDC be effective here in the Philippines. And we won't be tackling about the benefits, the advantage and disadvantage of CBDC. And for the the data that will be used for these studies are through interview and through related studies. So for review of related literature, so first, according to Grotov and Moser, privacy on CBDC will be easier when CBDC will be on token-based system compared to an account-based system. So this study proposes a CDBC that is token-based, where it's being transferred as cash with the other party except that it's a coin. So privacy is through blind signature. So this study proposes that when a country is that privacy will be easier in terms of token base. It's still being transferred like cash, but it's only a coin. And privacy, that the cryptographic that was used is blind signatures, and these blind signatures is between the central bank and the user, and it can be validated once the coin is being used.
So for the second review of related literature, according to Shteri and Loikanova, several countries in the Asia Pacific area are working on CBDC programs at varying stages. So in Cambodia, their central bank released a digital currency Bakong in October 2020, and Hyperledger Iroha, also known as the blockchain, as the basis for Bakong. The financial institutions that join the banking system keep all users and personal identifying information in the core Bakong system. Those transactions in which users or counterparties are received by a financial institution, and as a result, it has no access to the rest of the system's data. So in China, the digital yuan, which is also known as its initial project name, digital currency electronic payment, is at the most advanced stage of development among large economies. It uses a binary operating system interface standard, which defines a common configuration for moving ready to run binaries between computer systems. So the People's Bank of China has access to all transactions and can revoke them at any time. Users can, however, stay anonymous to their counterparties. And a system like this raises privacy issues about the use of the digital yuan, both inside and outside China. As a result, certain countries may disagree with trading CBDCs on a Chinese designed platform. Next slide. So in Japan, in April 2021, the Bank of Japan began experiments to test the technical feasibility of a CBDC, planning to issue DCJPY by the end of 2022. So the technology used is the distributed ledger technology, and permission-based blockchains have been identified as promising technologies to develop. So in South Korea, GroundX Clayton Ledger, which is based on the Ethereum blockchain, is used. So the initial phase is concentrated on the digital fiat currency's fundamental functions. And the second phase, which will take place in the first half of 2022, will focus on advanced features. So lastly, in Thailand, their CBDC program uses Hyperledger Besu supported by Consensus, which is also a blockchain. And the Hyperledger Besu makes it possible to make private transactions available using zero knowledge methods like the Aztec protocol, which ensures that only participants in the transaction may observe before and after token balances and transfer amounts. Next.
So according to Warren, Fan, and Blake, it's always important that when a country would like to implement their own central bank digital currency, it's always important to consider the technological design. And part of their study is that the technological consideration should have accessibility, security, integrity. It's convenient to use, reliability, stability, and of course, the system should be able to bear positive and negative interest rates, and the system should also allow foreigners to have an account domestically. So according to Bank of Japan, which is 2020, but my groupmate, we just had a different article. So during the 2020, the Bank of Japan still had no plans on issuing their own digital currency, but they had the study, and part of their study is that when they will be issuing a CBDC, here are the following technological features that it should have. First, it should have universal access. So when the country will implement, everyone should have access to it, whether it's on smartphones, whether it's on whether it's a coin or it's a SIM card, everyone should have access on it. And second is security. It must be secured because cyber attacks right now are also really very, very good. So it must have a very strong cybersecurity in order to prevent any illicit activities or any cyber attacks. Third is resilience. Of course, the CBDC should be available anytime, anywhere, and it should not be overloaded, even though all of us use it at the same time. And lastly is instant payment capability. The CBDC system should be able to be used like just like cash, where you can use it as a payment in doing person-to-person transaction or business-to-business transaction. So according to Bosu, Itatan, Margolis, Rossi, Winnick, and Yoshinaga, so there are what we call central bank laws. So these central bank laws, they govern on what the central bank can do, because if central bank will be doing something that is not within their laws, then it could create a risk, or it can create a problem. So in terms of the issuance of central bank digital currency, it's important to look for laws and regulation in the central bank in order to not to give rise to any risk. So it's important, if a country would like to issue a CBDC, look for laws whether it's legally accepted or not. According to Capuleta, Tabernaro, Bunag, Salamatin, and Regis, it is therefore too critical to review existing laws, rules, and regulations to ensure issuing CBDC in the Philippines is lawful. Just the same with the previous article, it's always important to revisit laws so that it won't cause any problems. Laws, norms, and regulations should also be reviewed. And laws governing data privacy, deposit secrecy, currency counterfeit, as well as rules governing foreclosure and guard. All of this should be revisited before implementing a central bank digital currency. So according to Ignacio 2020, so the motivation of countries in implementing the CBDC is because of the safety in terms of payment and domestic efficiency, and some economic reasons also why countries are implementing CBDC, because there is a decline of cash. Like Sweden and China, they began their study in implementing and piloting because they saw a decline of cash in their country. And according to MAS 2021, which is Monetary Authority of Singapore, so even though Singapore doesn't still have any plans in issuing CBDC, but they also did a study because they just saw a decline of cash in their country. People are no longer using cash, and some businesses are no longer accepting cash, but instead they prefer digital payments. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it really also accelerated the people in Singapore to really shift from cash to the use of digital payments.
And according to NEDESCO 2019, all of the urban areas in the country have the ability to connect in 4G. And on the other hand, the lowest percentage of the rural areas in the Philippines is only 50%. With this, it is safe to say that the people in the Philippines have the ability to experience central bank digital currency. Next slide, please.
So for among the countries that successfully released their central bank digital currency, it was in Bahamas, which they name as the Sun Dollar, which was their official digital currency to the public, and it was issued in October of 2020, and during their implementation or towards their launch for the public, one of the more complicating steps that they undertook was selecting a technology partner that can create a suitable design for that implementation. And the expression of interest that which was issued by the central bank in Bahamas, they allocated a good amount of um, responses from private or public for IT companies that ultimately led to only six of them at the end to be chosen as the official partner. At the end, it was NZIA Limited that was chosen since they bring together the collective knowledge and expertise of IBM, which is a leader in the enterprise blockchain, along with Zionisys Limited and which is a Singapore-based software development company that also specializes in blockchain solutions. Next slide, please.
Sherry 2021 mentioned that major world economies such as Brazil, China, the Eurozone, Japan, Russia, and the United Kingdom and the United States are all conducting CBDC research and trials in various stages. So the primary potential benefits of CBDC to consumers and the economy in comparison to fiat currencies and alternative payment systems are the following. So first is it is reliable low risk payment solution, which explains that there
Excuse
are more
me,
reliable.
your time is up. Your 20 minutes is over. Dr. Thomas,
Sir, is it possible to just show the frameworks for ano lang, for for a short minute lang po?
Dr. Thomas, Dr. Thomas, perhaps Dr. Thomas is having a technical problem. Yes, go ahead. So go ahead, please.
Okay. So first is its reliable low risk payment solution, which explains that there are more reliable means to carry out payment settlements compared to other available means. So second is its low cost and high efficiency, which explains faster transactions at lower cost. Third is promoting financial inclusion of disadvantaged groups, which explains that a bank account is not necessary to engage in transactions. And in addition, traceability and the possibility of transactions without a smartphone can promote the financial inclusion of disadvantaged groups. So lastly, it combats economic crimes and fraud. CBDCs are more traceable than fiat currencies and other payment systems for the government. Blockchains are likely to be permissioned, which serves as another defense layer. Next slide.
So for time purposes, so for the research gap, will CBDC be just like the hypothesis? Will CBDC be feasible in terms of technology in the Philippines? Will it be feasible in terms of legal and in economic wise? So just very fast for frameworks. So for our theoretical framework, we have the motivations why countries are piloting and experimenting about CBDC. So a lot of countries right now are piloting and experimenting. The very first is Sweden, which is the corona, and the reason why they are implementing because they saw a decline of cash in their country, and second is it has a payment safety and domestic efficiency, and lastly, of course, is the COVID-19 pandemic, which really boosted the use of digital currency. So this is it exactly. So and for our conceptual framework, so here are the variables that we will be using for our study, which is technology, legal, and economic will all be independent variable. And the dependent variable will be the CBDC. Will it be technology? Can it be fast? Can it be secured? Can it be is it resilient? And does it have a very strong cybersecurity? And second is the legal. Is it legally accepted to implement CBDC? And lastly is economic. Is the country experiencing a decline of cash, and are people really shifting from the use of cash to digital payments? So, that's it.
So for the operational framework, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, IT companies, and department and the government, and the Philippine laws and bank regulations will serve as the most important concepts to operate the CBDC. Next slide. So the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is the central bank of the Philippines, and its principal goal is to preserve price stability to promote balance and long-term economic growth. So a CBDC will allow the central bank to engage in large-scale intermediation by competing with private financial intermediaries for deposits. So the central bank, like a commercial bank, maintains assets that are backed by these liabilities. And the difference is the central bank is unable to invest in high return long-term initiatives. And the central bank will displace commercial banks from this market once it begins interacting with investment banks because it will earn higher expected rate of return. Lastly, a central bank can default, but it cannot go bankrupt. Next slide. So in the Philippines, existing payment technologies provide the foundation on which CBDC technology can be built. So the first is desirability. It covers the BSP's requirements regarding technologies that will help it achieve its objectives and mandate for its stakeholders. So the second is security. It covers the technology's risk management features for payments related risks, such as legal settlement and cybersecurity risks, as well as compliance with legal and regulatory obligations such as data privacy and anti-money laundering. The third is feasibility. It describes the system's technical and functional requirements, as well as the necessary customer interactions. Last but not the least is viability. It describes the organizational and financial structure required to execute the technology. So, Novus Technologies, they provide a wide range of digital banking and payment services throughout Asia through its operations in Singapore, the Philippines, Cambodia, Indonesia, and India. So this company was founded by experts who previously worked for IT world-class solution providers, which may also serve as an IT provider for the implementation of the CBDC. Next slide. So as for the Philippine laws and bank regulations, so the BSP under the existing legal framework may further boost the advancement of the cash-light economy through digital payments to create a more robust and critical mass of digital payments users in the Philippines. So the laws to be considered are the following. The first is the National Payment Systems Act under Republic Act number 11127. So it explains that the Bangko Sentral shall have the authority to own and operate payment systems as may be deemed necessary by the Monetary Board. So the BSP also owns and operates the system called the PhilPass, which stands for the Philippine Payment and Settlement System. This may consider wholesale CBDC as a mere representation of a fiat money. So the second is the Data Privacy Act of 2021 under Republic Act number 10170. So it explains that existing data privacy rules and regulations will apply. Personal data may be involved when opening an account using CBDC for settlement purposes, which shall be strictly confidential and shall only be used for the declared purpose under the Data Privacy Act of 2021. So the third is the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2021. The BSP is required by Section 6 of the NPSA to issue necessary measures to ensure that approved payment system comply with the Republic Act number 9160 as modified, the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001, and other related laws. Next slide.
So for the methodology,
So for the type of data that will only be used will be purely qualitative, which are the ones that we will get from the interview. And for the type of research design that we have chosen, is descriptive design as the best suited for the study. But the study itself doesn't entirely fall into this category of design because um, explore, because exploratory design also plays an important role in identifying the nature behind the subject of the study, which is the central bank digital currency. So therefore, the researchers will use both types of design, while being descriptive design to be the would be the leading type of design to cover the format.
So for data and method of gathering, so the data that will be collected for this study will be both primary and secondary. Primary because the researchers will be conducting key informant interviews, and secondary because the researchers will also be relying on the related studies and related articles that are already published in the website. So for method of gathering, so for technology, we'll be looking for we'll be interviewing someone from Department of Information and Communication Technology. In legal, we'll be interviewing a lawyer, and for economics, we'll be interviewing an employee from the PSP. And the researchers will be interviewing at least one, but we'll still interview more, and we'll only stop once the interviewers are just repeating the answers from the interview questions.
And lastly, for the data analysis, the group will not be using any statistical method as stated above. And in analyzing the data that would be collected, the method of analysis that the group would be doing is the comparison of the data given by the interviewees. And lastly, the evaluation will be done after the gathering of data. Next slide, please.
So that's all for our presentation.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll now proceed to the Q&A portion. I will begin the Q&A portion first. Okay. You essentially trying to do a qualitative research, right?
Yes, sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yes. There's certain issues with the. Okay. Let me just. Uh, how did you arrive at the conclusion to do a qualitative research rather than a quantitative research?
Sir, because we're more on analyzing whether CBDC is the implementation, more on the implementation and the readiness of the Philippines. So we're going to be analyzing through technology, legal, and economic. So we won't. So our studies is saying that we won't be doing an survey for people, but instead we're going to gather data through interview to really get data whether the Philippines is ready for the implementation of the CBDC.
Let me just ask you this question, a philosophical question. How did you arrive at the title of your paper? Why did you want to do this particular topic? What was the impetus?
See, can I answer, sir?
Sure.
So we arrive in this title because we so because of the COVID-19 pandemic, digital payments was really boosted. So we got to an analysis if we will it be feasible if we remove cash from the country and exchange it with digital currency. So because people are no longer, during the height of the pandemic, people are no longer using much of cash, but they would like digital payments to not, in order to prevent the spread of the virus. So we came up with our title na why not let's try to study na will it be effective na to have a digital currency in our country because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, my next question essentially is, are you aware of the difficulties in conducting a qualitative study during these pandemic times? Because remember, you cannot still, for example, you have to do primary data, so you have to interview them. What if they're not willing to be interviewed face to face?
So we
Okay, go.
can try Zoom. We can try interviewing them online instead if they don't agree with face-to-face interviews.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. My question is this: have you guys ever tried contacting people from the central bank if they will be willing to be interviewed?
Um,
Sir, say go.
for that, sir, we actually consulted with our thesis advisor beforehand to to we consulted with our advisor to let us know which people we can actually reach out to or we can eventually contact with. That is that can be that will have available time for us for the interview, and we also discuss it ourselves that if we may know one if we know from our relatives or other peers that can eventually agree to give us a interview as well.
Okay, let me just ask you this question. Do you have an idea of how many people you need to interview?
Sir, we will interview people that are professionals in their careers po, until the data that they are saying in the interview are
Like
almost
who?
alike po. Lawyers, people in the bank, and um, I think
IT professionals
IT
also.
professionals as well, sir.
Uh, yes, I understand that, but uh, how many people do you have a number that how many people should you interview as part of your methodology? Because it's not shown in your methodology how many people you should interview. Because that's one of the key questions of research methodology is you must have a sample size. Do you have a sample size?
Um, we actually do not have a precise estimate of a sample size of the interviews, but again, we also have consulted this to our advisor na when we will conduct these interviews, I think a good number would be at least 3 people po that we may reach out to that particular sector or industry. And if those 3 people are still giving different perspectives from each other, then we can go as to also ask another one until they until the the last interview that we will receive or the answers that we will receive will only be just and will be the same answers as the previous ones that we have collected. So
Guys, it's a bit difficult if you don't have an idea of how many people you should interview. Okay, because you must have a sample size. Because, for example, you have a population and then a sample framing. Okay, a sample size. So, let's say because you have an idea of how many people you have for your interview in terms of population. For example, how many people uh, are there at all? For example, the DSP people, because you're talking digital currency. For example, in China, they have the digital currency there. And the planning, for example, India, digital currency, as you are wants to focus on would be a digital currency by the central bank, right? It is not crypto.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Sir, yes,
So
Yes,
there's
sir.
a difference between crypto and digital currency, because a digital currency is issued by the central bank of the country. Therefore, it is supervised and controlled by the central bank. Unlike crypto, there's no control. There's no essentially, you don't know. Okay, so digital currency is another form of the paper money, right?
Yes.
So it is
Yes, sir.
controlled. Now the question is, so essentially you'll be talking to the BSP people whether they are ready or not. Now, okay, for example, if you talk, so who among the central bank people would you plan to interview? Did you have already? Did you know? And are they be willing to be interviewed? Have you contacted them? What if, let me ask this question, what if the people in the central bank would refuse to be interviewed? What happens now? Have you ever tried contacting them at all? BSP?
Not yet, sir.
not yet.
So you don't know whether they will be able to interview or not. What if they refuse? What will you do then?
I will try to interview people from from like the IT companies first, sir, and maybe and ask for help.
But if you interview the people from the banks, okay, guys, I'm from the bank. Okay, so I know what it is. Okay, the question is, if you interview the bankers, okay, that's not the same as the opinion of the central bank, because they're the one issuing. It's like, our money. Okay, we are the users. So the central bank is the printer, the creator of the currency. So you should interview the people who create the money. If you're talking about the digital currency, you should talk to the BSP people.
Yes.
So I see certain problems here. For example, in your interview, number one is the number of people. Roughly, you would have to interview something like probably a few hundred people uh, to have a semblance of a good qualitative paper. The other question here in terms of qualitative paper, do you guys actually know how to do a qualitative paper? I mean, were you taught in your research methodology how to do a qualitative paper? Like you do cohorts, you do phenomenology, etc. Are you aware of the things that you have to do? How to do a qualitative paper? I'm asking this question because this will crop up, these difficulties will crop up when you do a qualitative paper is very different from a quantitative paper. So we want to ask you beforehand if you're aware of the challenges of doing a qualitative paper.
We actually, sir, we haven't. We're not still aware of the specifics to make qualitative paper, as because in our previous on our previous course regarding um, about the research about financial research studies, we haven't reached that particular topic then, sir.
Okay, Mike, just to give you an idea, if Dr. Ahmed, may I continue?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Just to give you guys an idea, in doing a qualitative research, for example, let's not talk about the digital currency, no. So this is just a sample. For example, let's say you are interviewing, let's say some people who are informal settlers. Okay, so to make it easier, you guys know the informal settlers, mga squatters, no? Okay, let's say so you do a qualitative study. So the first thing is, of course, you go to the squatter area, right?
Yes.
Second, you will interview them one by one. Okay. Now, when you interview them, you interview their history, the life history. Then you interview why they moved to the city, why did they leave the provinces, what was the reason why they moved there? Is it economic? Is it family? Is it social? Whatever kind of pressure that they have to move to the city. And then after that, so you have essentially, that's what you call a phenomenology. So you look at the phenomenon of why they move from, for example, from the provinces, they move to the city and live in a squatter condition. For example, rather in the province, they live in a, clean environment rather than here in the city. They live beside the river, etc. And then, for example, so essentially, you look at the phenomenon, you interview. So then, so the question now is you must essentially it's not like in a quantitative study you do survey. For example, you ask a couple of questions and you're done, right? No, in a qualitative study you really exhaust the entire thing. Talang buo, no? You ask the entire thing, okay, from beginning to end. So essentially, that's how a qualitative study is. So it's not like a structured questionnaire or semi-structured or even unstructured questionnaire where you ask a few questions, the end. No. So so I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the difficulty and challenges in doing a qualitative study. That's why well, actually, we're surprised that this will be the first time that you guys, finance group, now will be doing a qualitative study. So we're not sure if you guys understand actually, to be honest, it's actually harder to do a qualitative rather than a quantitative study. Just to be honest, no? For those who knows, it is actually harder, a lot harder to do a qualitative. There are no numbers, but it's actually harder. Imagine, for example, you're going to interview people, let's say living in former settlers. Imagine you interview one by one, one by one, one by one. No, so because the situation is different for person that you interview. So imagine now in your paper you're going to interview the central bank people. Okay, so now, of course, in the ESP, there will be a particular department who will be in charge of that. Now, the question is, let's say they are willing to be interviewed, but if the data is very limited, let's say they're willing to be interviewed, but if the data is very limited, that they will give out. The question now is, and if you interview bankers, the most that bankers can give would be essentially what is in the news, what they will read in the newspaper, correct? Because how can you comment on something that you have not seen yet? Okay, for example, they know, of course, people know about cryptos, and so they'll give their input on that. But the question is, okay, so there are questions, of course, like digital wallets, etc. So essentially, it's the question now is who will control the digital wallet, etc., etc. For example, if it's the banks, who will control it? Is it the banks or the BSP, etc., etc.? So many questions like that. So the other concern here is that because after you go to thesis 2, to be frank with you guys, you only have 1.5 months left to 2 months to do. Okay, let me just give you a timeline. No, if you do a quantitative research after you go through the proposal defense, then your next question is to gather the data, right? Okay, so at most you do the data 1.5 months, then you start crunching the numbers. You have some statistician, or if you guys hire a statistician to do it. So let's say after 1 month, you start crunching the numbers, and then or 1 month and 1.5 months, or 1 month, etc. So then after the statistician crunches the numbers, let's say after a month or so, and then you start writing your chapter 5 and 6. Then that would be 2 months, because you have to write and edit, etc., etc., etc. Then after 2 months, you have to submit to the coordinator. Then after that, it will be given to the panel. We just finished the final defense of the thesis 2. So the question now is, will you be able to finish all your interviews within 1 month? Or at most 1.5 months? Because you have to write your chapter 5 and 6. That's the other question. What if the people you interview, you have a hard time contacting them because it's not secondary data? Now, unlike a masteral doctoral paper, you can postpone, if you don't finish, then you again, repeat again next semester. Because I have masteral advisees who keep on postponing next sem, next sem, next sem, next sem. It's not a problem because they're working. But you guys will want to graduate and work. So that's not an option. So the question is, what if you are not able to finish? You only are able to finish few interviews. What is now your option? That's the other thing. But the final decision, of course, rests with you guys. Huh? I'll give you the floor first before I move on to my formal questions. May I know your feedback from the group?
Sir,
Yes, sure.
For 1.5 months, I think we really can't give an exact answer, but I think we can try our best to really fulfill our methods of gathering data.
Okay, but like I mentioned, you must have a minimum sample size, right?
Yes.
So the minimum sample size, I think, is over, at least between probably 200 to 300 to 400 people. Will you be able to interview those many? At the minimum, at least 100. Will you be able to interview at least 100 people?
We will be trying as a group, sir, to reach that number of sample size for our interview.
Remember, this is interview, no? This is not. This is a because this one is unlike a quantitative study wherein you just ask a few questions and that's it. This one is qualitative study. That means say your questions will be very extensive, meaning the interview will be maybe lasting 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Would we interviewers be willing to do that, to give you that much time?
Yes, sir.
I leave it up to you guys. But if I were a banker, I wouldn't give you guys 3 hours of my time, no? Unless I'm very free. But the question is, probably an hour or so. That's probably yes. But longer than that, I really doubt it. No? So that's my problem. Anyway, let's go now to. But we leave the final decision to a group. Okay, let's go now to your. Can we go to your slides one by one?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Can we here? Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. No, not that one. Okay. Here in the statement of problem, we have a problem here. Can you have it full screen, guys?
Okay, sir.
So because the statement of problem should be in question form, no? It should be in a question mark. So there's no question. What is the problem here?
Mm.
Okay, whether the digital currency will be effective. Okay, so how do you define effective then? Well, what do you mean by effective? So there's a question here, no? So you have to rephrase your statement into a question form. No? Next slide, please. Okay, the research objective. Okay, the research objective is not connected to your statement of problem. So you want to check whether the BSP can start rolling out the digital currency. That's essentially what you want to do, right?
Yes, sir.
So, the comparing to other countries is only part of the research, but essentially the objective is the BSP ready to roll out, right? So you have the wrong research objective here. Okay, so you have to rephrase your objective here. Now, next slide, please. So in the hypothesis here, okay, even the way you wrote the hypothesis wrong, it's not. You have, what the so essentially that's hypothesis 1, 2, 3. It's not. It's written in not correctly, no.
Dr. Thomas, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Remember, this is qualitative research. There shouldn't be any hypothesis.
Yes, yes. Dr. Ahmed is right, no? So you are not going to prove it quantitatively here. So it should be the research questions here. So you should remove this, no? Next slide, please. So you should remove this and then pull part of the research questions, no? Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. You're referring to the Philippine Central Bank digital currency, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you should so you mentioned purely on measurement. So the question is, what are you going to measure?
Sir, in terms of technology, and then in terms of legality and in economics also.
Again, the question is, who will provide you those answers? Will
Sir,
the central bank be willing to give you those confidential information?
So what we're trying to interview, sir, is that for technology, parang it's like what will be the like can the Philippines provide security, a really great cyber security? Is the Philippines, is the internet connection already fast in the Philippines? And for legality, we'll be looking for whether issuing a CBDC will be accepted legally in the country. And for economics, we'll be analyzing whether is the Philippines really experiencing a decline of cash, and are people really shifting to digital payments.
Okay. At this point, I will give the floor now to Dr. Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed, would you like to continue the Q&A portion, Dr. Ahmed? Dr. Ahmed?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
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 sir.
we can hear you, Dr.
Sorry.
Ahmed. Please continue, Dr. Ahmed. I'll leave the floor to you for the moment.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Well, actually, Dr. Thomas has covered everything, but since you guys decided to continue this, I noticed that you are not following the APE style. Remember, this is an academic paper, and you have to follow the APA format, particularly the 7th edition, which is mandated by DLSU. And you will have also to adhere with the thesis format. You should have chapter 1. Your chapter 1 is the introduction. So you don't have any chapters. Okay. So you start with chapter 1 on, I don't see any page number. So your paper should have a page number. Okay, and it should appear on the upper right corner according to the APA style. Now, in addition to that, like Dr. Thomas stated, what is your paper is all about? What is the major problem for your paper? Now, in the statement of the problem, I noticed that you are making use of in-text citation and you're quoting this and you're quoting that, when in fact your research problem should be very specific. This study aims to what? So what is it that you're trying to find out? Now, under your hypothesis part, I noticed that you placed your research question there. So since this is qualitative paper, there shouldn't be any hypothesis because you're not testing any hypothesis here. Okay, and why did you place your research question under the hypothesis? When in fact it should be under your statement of the problem. So under the statement of the problem, the primary problem, and then specifically, this study aims to answer the following research questions or the following sub-problems. And then you should align it with your research objectives. Okay? So here, under your hypothesis, it is stated here, the following are the research questions. What are they? You only have one. Is the Philippines ready for the implementation of the digital currency? And then you have a bullet, another bullet, and another bullet. Am I correct? So you have to restate this. Is the Philippines ready for the implementation of digital currency in terms of 1.1, technology, 1.2, legality, 1.3, economics. So you have to be very specific, come up with your research questions. Now, with respect to your significance of the study, what makes your paper significant for the Philippine government? You should discuss the significance of your paper to the Bangko Sentral, the banking industry, the consumers. This is an academic paper, and therefore you have to discuss the significance of your study to the academy, future researchers, as well as for you guys as the current researchers. Why are you interested in this? Okay. Now, the data in terms of the scope and limitation, I think you will have to elaborate further. Who are going to be your respondents? Whom are you going to interview? What level of the organization? The central bank is composed of from so many departments. So you have to be very specific. You're talking about the IT industry. Who among the IT industry? What level? Is it the president, the vice president? Is it supervisor? What kind of IT people are you going to interview? Now, what kind of interview are you going to conduct? Is it structured interview, unstructured interview? Because remember, you're collecting primary data using qualitative method and using exploratory study. Now notice you don't have any definition of terms. To the layman, they wouldn't understand what a digital currency or a central bank digital currency is. So you will have to define all your terms. Now, next, notice review of curated literature. This should be chapter 2. Okay. And then you will have to align your literature review again with your research questions, because your literature, that's why it's related literature and studies. It should support your statement of the problem. It should support your research question. It should support what you're doing. It should be related. So now look at your map. What is this? When you give birth to a child, you should name your child. So this is figure what? Figure number 1. Now, what is your source? This is an academic paper, and therefore you will have to indicate the source of your map. All right. Again, I think this is a table. Benefit explanation, the case of the ECNY. You left it hanging. What is this? Table 1. Now, the key benefit of the CBDC to consumers and the national economy. Now, is this an APA format? You better double check. Now, next to that, you have the framework. This is chapter 3. So you should indicate it is chapter 3. You're starting a new chapter. Okay. Now you have theoretical. Again, you're having a figure that is left hanging. So this is figure what? Figure 1, figure 2. What is it all about? Give it a title. So with your conceptual framework of the study, again, you're having a figure. Now, what is the number of the figure and what does it represent? Chapter 4, I believe Dr. Thomas discussed it thoroughly. Now, again, you should come up with the title for your chapter 4, which is your methodology. Under that, you have the research design. Now, qualitative approach, exploratory study, and then you have the research sampling, but you did not indicate, as Dr. Thomas said, how many. How are you going to arrive at your sample size? In terms of data collection, what are your instruments? You have to be very specific. Are you going to make use of structured, unstructured interviews, the sample size, etc., instrument of research, sampling? If I were you, I think it would be better to make use of the mixed method. Instead of relying heavily on the qualitative method, perhaps you can make use of the mixed method, the quantitative and the qualitative. Come up with a structure, come up with a survey questionnaire, have it pre-validated, come up with, decide whether your interviews are going to be structured or unstructured. It should be a follow-up to your survey questionnaire, but the decision is yours. Now, in terms of the data analysis, so you're relying heavily on qualitative, so I won't be questioning any statistical methods. Now, references, make use of the APA style. Is this in the APA style? So you better double check. And these are my observations, and these are my questions and comments. Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Yes, okay. I think the suggestion of Dr. Ahmed is a great suggestion. I follow the same suggestion of Dr. Ahmed, wherein I also suggest you do a mix qualitative and quantitative method, unlike a purely qualitative method, no? Because I am really apprehensive for you guys that you will not finish your paper on time. So that means to say you will fail your thesis 1. If you fail your thesis 1, you go back to square 1. Thesis 2. Okay, so imagine if you, because you are not allowed, unlike in the graduate school, you are not allowed to extend your stay in thesis 2. It's only 1 semester. In graduate school, if you don't finish, you can always enroll, re-enroll, no problem. Okay, and then the maximum is 8 times. That means 8 semesters for a graduate school. Undergrad is only 1 sem. If you don't make it, you fail. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that restrictions, guys. Are you aware of that restriction? May I ask you guys, are you aware? No. Guys, are you aware of that limitation as an undergrad student?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so unlike a grad student, like many of my advisees, they kept on postponing and postponing and postponing and postponing. It doesn't matter with them because they're working, right? So they're earning money, they're working. So what? You know, I will just finish it anyway. If I get my master's degree later on, it's okay. If I get my PhD, it's okay. But you guys, you'll fail. It will appear in your grade and you'll be delayed. So the suggestion of Dr. Ahmed is a great suggestion. I also would like you guys to suggest to make it a mixed method, no? Rather than a purely qualitative, you do a quantitative and qualitative method. In this way, you can have a structured survey questionnaire or semi-structured. Okay, do you guys know what is structured? The difference between a structured and semi-structured?
No, sir.
Okay. For example, if you stay in a hotel, sure, in a restaurant, they'll ask you to fill up a form, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if the question is you have to answer a definite answer, meaning to say they're not asking you to give your own answer, maybe either yes or no, etc. Meaning to say there's a definite answer, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
that's a structured questionnaire, okay? Now, what is a semi-structured questionnaire? For example, let's say you go to a restaurant, they'll ask you to fill in a form, and then there's some parts of the question say, what do you think? Then you give an essay answer, right? Aside from the yes or no, then you give an essay. That is semi-structured. An unstructured questionnaire means to say everything is essay. Okay, so now you know, right? Okay, so it's up to you guys whether you want to conduct a structured questionnaire or a semi-structured, because there are some, for example, in the interview wherein some people would not want to face you guys, but they just ask you to send in the questionnaire. Okay, before I had a student here in our school. Once I referred her to my former advisee who works in BPI, and then the student who wants to interview my former student, my former advisee in BPI, but the student refused to meet with this student because she was very busy. She said, because of course I did not intervene anymore because that's between the two, right? So the one being interviewed just requested that just please send the form to me and then I'll answer it. She did, he did, and then she replied. The end of story. So, but he really wanted to interview the person, but the person refused because of work consideration. So, you must take into consideration that kind of scenario. Now, okay, so if it's a mixed one, that that would be better because you now have two approaches, and then you have something to work on the quantitative side. The thing is, because you guys are finance majors rather than literature major, okay, or let's say sociology major, because if you're a sociology major, or let's say, for example, you're a literature major, then a qualitative study would be more appropriate for you guys. But you guys are finance, so you're used to quantitative. So the suggestion of Dr. Ahmed is, I think, better suited for you guys rather than purely qualitative. So, and then also on the suggestions of Dr. Ahmed, he covered essentially everything already on you following the APA, etc., the format and the chapters. No? So you're not following that one, no? You should follow, for example, in the scope of in the significance. Can you go back one slide? Significance, for example. For example, you should do that into the, for example, the regulators, because you want to talk to the regulators, the BSP, the industry, which are the bankers, and then the academe, then the, what you were taught, right? You should go through that. Can you go next slide? Be beyond the. Go ahead. Go ahead on the, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay. The research gap. Can you go back to the research gap? Okay. So essentially, the research gap isn't, well, it's not correct. No. The research gap is what do you want to do? For example, in the review of literature, what were they talking about? What is lacking? Essentially, what they talked about, but except that you're going to do it in the Philippines, right? And then in terms of the legal, essentially that is already what is a research gap in terms of legal? Is it the legal structure in the Philippines or whatever? You cannot just say legal economy. It's not. It should be very, very specific, not very generic term. Okay, like economy. What do you mean by research gap of economy? It's so broad, no? Okay, it should be very specific. What would be the research gap that you would want? Can you go next slide, please? Next slide. Next slide. Okay, wait. Go back one slide. Okay, here. No, go back one slide. Okay, so here in the theoretical framework, you did not even use any theories. That's why it's called the theoretical framework. There's no theory here. So you should look for the theories that you should, use, no? Okay, to support what you're looking for. Okay, next slide, please. Then wait, stop there. So here, essentially, in the conceptual, for example, what would be your independent variables that you would be using? Okay, and then legal, what would be the independent variable that you can put as part of your legal framework? And economic, what do you mean by, what do you mean by economic? Can you please clarify, guys? Is it the, what area of economy are you referring to?
Sir, more on the Philippine economy, like if is there a decline of cash in the Philippine economy, and is there a increase in digital payments?
So you should be more
users.
specific. It's about the cash. The money is playing cash, and then the yeah, that one, not economic. It's not the entire economy. So you should be more specific on that one. On the legal side, which one are you referring to?
Philippine laws and the central bank laws.
So you should be more specific on that one, not very generic. No, and the technology side, which one are you referring to?
More on the technological design of the system.
Then you should be more specific. Let's say blockchain, etc. What? Not technology. Technology covers everything. It should be very specific. You cannot be like very general, no? Okay, then I suggest you put it into the try to revise your conceptual framework, and then your output, what you're looking for is not, well, essentially is not the digital currency, but the adoption. Essentially, that's what you're trying to look for, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can you go next slide, please? So the other question that is here is how would you prove now that the country is ready or not? What will be the instrument you use to prove it? From your review literature, what did they use to prove that the country is ready or not?
More for the technology, sir. Like,
No, I
yeah.
mean the entire thing. The entire thing. So how would you prove now that a country is ready or not? So what will be the technique that you'll be using? Did you understand what I'm saying? Because you want to prove something that the Philippines is ready. So how would you prove it? That's again lacking in your methodology. Or you should put that in your conceptual framework as
If
part
I
of the
may,
methodology. Yes, sure, Dr. Ahmed, go ahead.
what Dr. Thomas is trying to say, how are you going to measure the readiness of Philippine for the implementation of the CBDC? Isn't it you're trying to measure the readiness of the country?
Yes,
So
sir.
how will you measure that in terms of what?
In terms of technology and in terms of legal and economical.
Yeah, but technology is so broad. Legal is so broad. Economically, it's so broad. In terms of what? Technology in terms of what? Legal in terms of what? Economically in terms of what?
For technology, more on the design, well, is the system secured? Is it does it have strong cybersecurity? Is it resilient? And for the legal side,
But
more
you
on
did
the
not. But you did not indicate that as part of your conceptual framework. Did you place that as part of your conceptual framework?
we just state we didn't include that. We just place technology, legal, and economically.
Well, technology is very broad, therefore you have to be very specific, concise and specific. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I noticed that your paper lacks, you don't have a literature map. Do you have a literature map? Yes, what page?
We don't have a literature map for our paper.
Exactly. So as Dr. Thomas said, you have to discuss at the end of chapter 2, which is the review of related literature, your literature gap followed by your literature map. And you should come up with figure that depicts your literature that you used to support your paper. Now, Dr. Thomas, if you agree with me, I would like to suggest to change the title of the paper, perhaps to I'll place it in the public chat. The Philippines readiness for the implementation of the digital currency, an exploratory study.
I'm okay with the suggestion, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. I have no further comments or suggestions.
Sir, can I just add a bit of ano lang po before ending po the whole session?
Dr. Thomas, you with us? Are you still there?
Sorry, nakamute pala ako.
It's okay.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, sir. But for the ano lang po, no, for context lang po for some of the parts. More specifically in our hypothesis kasi, we from our previous class, our instructor gave us a specific form, the formats and definitions or a sample of in doing the whole research paper, and this on for this particular document po that he gave, there under the hypothesis section po, there was it said po that the researchers can choose to answer either questions emanating from the literature po. So, and the examples given there were questions that pertains to ask the literature of the related literature po of the study. So we followed that format lang po as he gave us, and I thought it was the correct format po that he gave or he provided.
Dr. Ahmed, I give you the floor.
Well, actually, I've been teaching research in the undergrad as well as the graduate school. Now, what we follow is I looked at several papers and we were given the format. So the format that I gave you is the format that you should follow. Now, you can also go to the library, you look for a sample paper that received an excellent grade, and then look at the format there and try to copy it. Okay, now it's unethical to ask, so I'm not gonna ask about your professor. But normally we have chapter 1. Under chapter 1 is the introduction. You start with the background of the study, statement of the problem, the research questions, the objectives, the hypothesis, and then significance of the study, and you end up with definition of terms. Now, if you will be adopting the mixed method, therefore you will have to come up with hypothesis. Now, under chapter 2, you have a review of related literature. And then at the end of that, you will have to align your literature with your research question as well as your statement of the problem. Then you will have to divide it into subparts that will support your research. Now you will have to coming up with a research gap, discuss the research gap as well as the literature map. For chapter 3, you will have the framework of the study. Particularly, you will have the theoretical framework, the conceptual framework, and the operational framework. Now, under chapter 4, then you will have the research methods, etc., etc. In terms of the research design, in terms of the data collection, statistical methods, and all this stuff. So perhaps you can double check the DLSU format. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Can you please move forward a bit with the slides? Okay, in the operational framework, you should have a drawing, no, a figure on how to operationalize your study, not blah blah blah, no. It should be a figure. Okay, and then next slide, please. Okay, it should not be blah blah blah. It should be a figure, no, operational framework. Next slide, please. Again, the same thing. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Do you guys understand what I'm saying on the operational framework?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, okay, just give you a simple example. For example, you are teaching somebody who's going to, let's say, who's going to cook a quarter pounder in McDonald's. You are the teacher of that person. It so happens you're absent that day. So are you going to teach that person how to cook? Then you have to draw it, right, in a cardboard. So essentially, there's no blah, blah, blah. It's just a drawing, right? The first part is what are the, for example, the patty, the bread, etc., the mayonnaise, and the tomato. Then the next slide would be how will you cook the essentially, you're going to put it grill, the method. You're going to show how it's cooked, right? The tomatoes are sliced. How long are you going to grill the patty, the bread, etc. Then the final picture will be you assemble them together, and then there's a quarter pounder. So essentially, that's what operational framework is. Okay, you're gonna do it in a picture form. So since it will be mixed, then you would. So okay, so in the mix, I would suggest that you use a Likert scale, for example. So then you would do in your structured survey questionnaire, for example, like you ask a question, in the question whether, how close or how far is it from, for example, being the realization. For example, let's say you ask, let's say said you asked somebody from the BSP. For example, let's say you talk about, let's say, the legal department. How is it, if there are obstructions in the legal structure, will it require Congress to pass some laws to, there's some blockage, for example, right? So then that would take more time. Then now you ask the person you interviewed to measure, like in a Likert scale, let's say 1 to 6. Well, how soon will it happen? Is it, very far, very near, etc.? So, and then, for example, if you interview somebody from the regulatory part, the one who will give the approval to the banks, let's say, to let's say, have digital wallet, for example, in the, let's say, Miguel, you want to open an account, right? But it's not a paper money, but it's a digital e-wallet with the bank, for example. Then you have to give. So let's say Siegfried is the BSP regulator. How would the regulator give the license to the banks, for example, for you to open an account, for example, right? So then how far or near, and then what are the hurdles? So you measure them in terms of the degree. You guys understand?
Yes, sir.
So the person answering would now give his opinion in terms of quantitative by 1 to 6, for example, no? Between it's about to agree or not to agree or whatever, no? Okay. So so you have to change your research design into that. Now, I have one suggestion here. Okay, in terms of the Likert scale. Normally in a Likert scale in the questionnaire, you have the same type of let's say from let's say not agree or totally to totally agree, for example. But my suggestion is because in my own research before, I had some difficulty in that aspect. Now, so one method, one suggestion I'll give you guys is this. No? the same the same measure of measuring, for example, 1 to 6, but the scale, the scale is the same, but the content would be different. For example, let's say you can have wait, can you give me just 2 minutes? I'll just show you. It's very hard to explain. Okay, let me just to help you guys out. Okay, can you can I share with you on the screen? Let me just allow me to share.
Go ahead, please. You can share your screen.
Okay, here you see the normal way is this one. This is for my own research. Okay, you see now here. Do you see it on your screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so traditionally, this is the traditional way. Let me just share. Okay. Let me just traditionally, this is how it's done, right? Do you see it, guys?
Yes, sir.
Even normally, that's what you see, right? But when I was doing my own paper, I had difficulty here. The problem is 1 to 6, okay? The problem is when I was asking my responses to reply, they had a great difficulty in answering the question. Wait, let me just show this. So I had to revise my question like this, questionnaire. For example, guys, you see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So my question here is about, this one is about operational plan. If hospital does they have the operational plan. So the question now, if I put the strongly agree to strongly disagree, if you were the one answering, you have a very great difficulty to answer whether your operational plan is already compliant or not yet, correct? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So he said tugma, di ba? It's not connected, right? If you use the strongly disagree to strongly agree, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is what I came up with. Say same 1 to 6, but from none to compliant and working. Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then you can go back to your presentation again. So you can do that, no? And so you can now, for example, whether they like, for example, that let me just show you again. So for example, here you can ask the questionnaire whether is the BSP no plan yet, or the planning stage, or initial preparation stage, or partially compliant, newly compliant, or working already. So you can ask this question, no? Or something to that effect, no? Can you guys show again? We're already over time. We have to finish this already. Your slides again, guys. Okay, then let's continue again. Next slide. Okay, okay. Then you have to more specific here. Okay, next slide. You see here you have no? Okay, you have to be more specific. Who? For example, the lawyer. What kind of lawyer, BSP, etc. The department. No. Okay, we're gonna interview the ICT also. Next slide, please. Okay, and then essentially you'll be using statistical method after your survey questionnaires. No? Okay, next slide. Okay. So I hope our suggestion will be able to help you, no? To overcome. That way, at least you can now limit your interview. You are not forced to interview, let's say, the X number of, but you must have also, you must have you must talk to your advisor on the sample size. So you must be able to come up with a sample size. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So I have no further questions, Dr. Ahmed. So,
Okay, me too. So I'll send our candidates to the waiting room so we can deliberate on the grade. So perhaps you can stop the recording. Who's recording among you?
Yes,
Please
sir.
stop the recording. Thank
yes, sir.
you.